Namaskar and welcome to this exciting new episode of Sattology Debunking Mythology. And today we are going to take you to Kashmir. And before we start the show, we have a very prominent guest today and a good friend. So in these shows, Sat means truth and logos is a Latin word which means a study or a science. And due to grammatical rules, etymological rules, I have to add additional t so that the word becomes consonant, is phonetically accurate in both Sanskrit and English. So we have to pronounce it as Sattology, not Sattology. Sattology. Then it becomes Sanskrit and English correct. The word Sat is an antonym of myth. Myth means in Sanskrit is a root word or dhatu, which means a lie or an imagination. So the colonialists combined that with logos again create mythology, which means a science of fake or science of imagination. Sattology is a true antonym of mythology. Thank you for coming on the show today. Today we are going to take you to a place which is historically connected with the culture of Veda and India, the Sun Temple, Martand Sun Temple. And it is a historical place, and we will go through a journey with Mr. Rajesh Singh, who is a civil servant in India. So without delay, let us welcome Sri Rajesh Singh. Namaskar, Rajesh.
Namaste Atyadiji and namaste all the viewers. Um, I will share the screen and continue talking about it.
Yeah. So before we move on, so the exact geographical location of this place is in which part of India?
Martand is in Anantnag district of Kashmir state of India. Now it is a union territory, Kashmir and Ladakh.
Right.
So it is about 60 kilometers from the
North of Srinagar, capital of Union
Srinagar.
Territory of Kashmir. Right.
Yeah, I'll just go to the.
So generally,
So
the yes. So generally, the importance of this place is a famous sun temple, right? Sun worship temple.
yeah, it's a very important sun temple. And if you go now to this part of the country, you'll see a relatively modern temple here on the left upside on the screen, which is
Uh-huh.
also known as Martand Temple. It is just below the plateau on which the ancient temple, which you can see on the right bottom side,
Mhm.
existing there. So name has been derived there, and Martand, as has been mentioned in Puranas, has been derived from two words Mrit and And. And means egg. So these eggs were revived by the mother of the Devas, by Aditi, and sun god was created here. So
Mm.
this place is still a place of continuous worship. And when you start going up, if you see through these roads and you reach there on the plateau, there's an orchard at present, apple orchard is there. And then you have this temple which is now in ruins, but it's a magnificent temple. And whatever remains there, even at present, impresses it with simplicity, solidity, and architectural wonder. Now, the question which may arise in the mind of the viewers and the listeners here, that during which period this temple was built? And that's a very important question. This was built during 8th century. And how well do we know about or told about this period? That is very important, because as Mr. Aditya informed in the very beginning, that here during discussion about Indian culture, we have to see that we know the correct facts of the Indian culture, various aspects. Now, I'll talk about a very popular teleserial, which was made available on OTT platform. You can see on this screen that is about Kashmir, the story, full documentary on the history and timelines of Kashmir Valley. So, of course, being an enthusiast about knowing our own country, I went through this serial. And the first episode, it's a 6 episode serial. In the first episode, it starts from Alexander. And Alexander has been described as an emperor here during 326 BC. You can see on the screen. Next person who is talked about, next emperor, a ruler who is talked about in the serial is Ashoka. Ashoka, we know, was a great emperor. And the period assigned to him is about 250 BC, which you can see here on the screen. What is very, you can say, interesting, perplexing, or surprising that the next year in the timeline, which is shown here, is in 1339 afterwards. So almost, if you see, there is a gap of almost 1600 years old. So this is very surprising. And there is a huge gap in the timeline which is being told about. So the information which is available worldwide on open platforms through social media or through popular mediums, electronic medium, etc. Not much is talked about of the Kashmir history of pertaining to a very large period. You can see here that after Ashoka, who has been talked about here as an emperor, the next dynasty or the next ruler who is being talked only in the 14th century. So 14th century in AD and almost 3 centuries or 2.5 there. So 1600 century. How can it be that you don't tell about this huge gap?
So one of the, Rajesh, I have one question for you.
Yeah.
Is that most of the Western audience only talks about Kashmir history from an Islamic point of view. And with due respect to, we are an academic channel mostly. And so with due respect to everyone, and we want to talk about the real facts. That's what Sattology stands for. Now, the most of the Kashmir history is wrongly told to Americans and to the Western audience, where the Kashmir, the word itself is from Mahabharata, comes from Kashyap Mira, the garden of Kashyap Rishi.
Right.
So what you're showing is remarkable. Like 250 BC is like way before even any of the modern Western cultures even came out. So why it is so? Why the Indian government doesn't say so much about this history?
No, government is now, you see, is talking about, and this is a protected monument. But what I would say here, that government has its role. But as you told, that we being an academics, we being the people who inherit cultural heritage, it's our responsibility to talk about those facts which are not known. Now, not telling about the facts is also incorrect. And you cannot ignore a part of historical chronology. Interestingly, where in Kashmir, Kalhan, the great poet who happened during the 12th century, he has given chronicle the details of the rulers in his Raj Tarangidi. Raj means rulers, dynasties, and Tarangidi means rivers. So he gives, Kashmir was one place where literary work was produced in remarkable way, and the historical document which Raj Tarangidi is was also there. Despite that, so that gives a very wrong and incorrect picture. In fact, I'll say that I went to Kashmir first time in 1996 for some work. And when I was traveling back from Kashmir to Anantnag district, where Martand is there, from the bus, I could see that there are ruins of temples. So that was the first time that I came to know that Kashmir has great temples also. So that is the level of awareness. And even now, after so many years, even my colleagues, those who are very well educated, would not associate Kashmir with very great temples. So why is it important to know about the period? The period during which these temples were created. Let us see. There is a place known as Parihaspura. I don't know how many of you may be aware. This is in Kashmir, now in Baramulla district, about 20 kilometers from Srinagar, the capital city, not very far away. Now, if you see here on the screen, there are ruins of some structure. You can see one structure on the right side, and in forefront there is base of another ruined structure, and only very few carvings are existent, and there are amorphous and abundant ruins scattered, so much so that in local language this place Parihaspura is known as Kani Sahar. Kani means stone, Sahar means town, so this is known as town of stone. Now, once upon a time, during 8th century, when Karkota dynasty was ruling, this place was capital of the great emperor Lalitaditya. Now, this is very interesting or important. Again, I would say that the timeline gap which I showed is neither talks about Karkota dynasty nor talks about Utpala dynasty, doesn't talks about Lohara 1 dynasty, Lohara 2 dynasty, and many rulers, despite the fact that these rulers are mentioned in detail in Raj Tarangedi, which is a historical treatise, of course, poetic historical treatise. So why? Now, Mr. Aditya has asked this question. The reason may be that we don't want to tell about our past. And I will just read from a book which is published by Archaeological Survey of India, and the author Debala Mitra there writes, which is a government document, also this here. Parihaspura was the capital of Lalitaditya, who erected not less than 4 imposing temples in honor of Muktkeswa, it was a gold image, Parihaskeswa, a silver image, Mahabaraha with a golden armor, and Govardhandhara, a silver image, and a Garuda standard 54 cubits high. Unfortunately, all these temples are now reduced to amorphous ruins, as you can see on the screens even today. Now he goes on to tell, from the dimensions of the utterly ruined available 2 temples on the Kareva, that is plateau of Parihaspura, it is evident that these 2 temples, possibly Parihaskeswa and Muktkeswa, were larger than Martand temple. So now nothing exists there. I mean, no structure exists there. The carvings, the architectural implements. So nobody talks about Parihaspura. You will find some details about Martanda. And the writer gives the detail that there were few temples which were even larger than the Martand. And the history doesn't talk about this period, the ruler, and most important, the cultural heritage which would have inherited. So this is very important, as you in the initially period said, that we don't associate Kashmir with many aspects of the Indian cultural heritage. The literature which was produced there, the cities which were constructed that time, not to talk about the buildings, even big temples here. Now, if there is nothing, what we will talk about? We'll just talk about stones. So that is the kind of the loss which we have suffered. And as a learner of cultural heritage, as I have discussed in my first 2 lectures, we have to know about our cultural heritage, which shows that this part of this part of Kashmir was very much related with the cultural streams of the rest of the subcontinent, that is Indian continent.
Now, one
Parihaspura incidentally means to smile.
parihas,
In,
yes, parihas means
yeah,
to smile.
parihas. So see, you see, our culture. I mean, this is a very important chapter of our cultural heritage. This ruler Lalitaditya, nobody talks about emperor. He was real emperor. His uh, empire was till Iran, in Tibet, in China, in India, in West, in Dwarka, and in East, Orissa, and even up to Assam. And we don't even talk about even in modern time. And these are not something which is hidden. These are available in books and literature. Yeah, kindly.
No, one of the things I see that this temple is completely, or this location is completely raised to the ground. And
I yeah, I'll
so
read.
was there a major earthquake, or because I see that not only the raised to the ground, but in the central picture that I see, in the central picture there is a person who is holding it. Now his
Yeah,
face is also removed. Is that like it was done manually, or it was done because it cannot be done if it was an earthquake?
actually, see, it cannot happen in earthquake that all the debris will be scattered around. It will just fall nearby,
Correct.
and still you will have a lot of huge. Because as I uh, read from the book, some of the temples were larger as compared to Martand, where still a big structure stands. We will talk about it later on.
Right.
I'll read from the same book. This book, which is published, an authentic book on Kashmir. It is Pandarethan, Avantipur, and Martand, three places. It is published by government agencies, Archaeological Survey of India, and it is in 90s. I will read. The process of destruction and denudation during this period, I mean in 14th century, started in the later part of the reign of Sultan Sikandar, that is 1389 to 1413. You saw the chronology, the first Sultan dynasty chronology. By virtue of his breaking the images and demolishing the temples, almost all the temples of the country are stated to have been desecrated and pulled down or badly shattered, and the images were broken, mutilated, or thrown away from the temples. The destruction of the temples is believed to have been effected by piling heaps of timber in the temples and setting fire to these heaps. So it's a great damage to our cultural heritage. It's a great damage, and here human intervention was very large extent, it was responsible. So that's the fact.
in
So
in one of my first books, Sattology Debunking Mythology, I wrote on the history of Kashmir, and I wrote in detail about Lalit Aditya too. And so he was in 711 AD, 712 AD. That time he was the king over here in this area.
yeah, 724, 760. I mean, that
Correct.
is the period, is it the time? Right.
Yes. Please continue, Rajeshji.
Yeah. So now we will come back to Martand because we have some structure there and the temple which I would be talking about. So you see, this is one picture which is available on Google also, and it was taken by one of the persons in colonial period. That whatever is existent is very important for us from cultural, architectural, and sculptural angle. I'll show you one aspect, the layout of the temple. If you see here, there are rows in the bottom one, rows of colonnaded cells are there. And if you go to Kanchipuram in Tamil Nadu state of India, where Pallava dynasty was ruling around the same period, 7th, 8th century AD. And there is a temple dedicated to Shiva there. There is to Vishnu also, Kailash Natha temple, Bakunt Perumal temple. So you can see the layout is quite extent similar. There is a rectangular courtyard in both of them. You have a gateway in front, and all along the rectangular courtyard, there are cells which are dedicated to gods, individual gods. And in the center, you will have the temple dedicated to presiding deity. Here in case of Martand, it is sun god. On the right side, you can see here it is Lord Shiva. And then individual cells also you can see. I have taken two of them. Now, of course, on the left side here, the cells are broken, mutilated, destroyed. But in southern state of Tamil Nadu in Kanchipuram, they are intact. And you can see there is a connectivity. Now, not only in Kashmir we had temple, but there was cross-cultural relation between the two parts of the subcontinent at that time. And cultural streams were being not only exchanged, but they were also being practiced with a specific characteristic feature pertaining to that region. Now, I'll also show that if you see on the left side, Martand Sun Temple is there. Of course, it's broken. But another temple I have shown on the right side is from central India, from the state of Rajasthan, Baroli. And you see the essential architectural features match. You have the sanctum sanctorum. Here, this part will correspond to it. Then you have a Ardha Mandapa or Antarala, and then main Mandapa or main hall where public will enter and gather before having darshan or praying to the god. So you see here also it is three Mandapa, Ardha Mandapa, half cell which connects the sanctum sanctorum, that is Garbhagriha, to the Mandapa, and then in the last you have Garbhagriha. It was also a Sikhar temple, but in case of Martand you cannot see it. But the existing structure does establishes that the essential architectural components which were being constructed in the rest of the part of the country or the subcontinent of that time were very much being followed in Kashmir also. Now, as it happens, when you move from one place to another, depending on the local environment, weather condition, and architectural styles developed during the rule of the rulers, certain specific features can be seen in the temples of those periods. And that's why Martand is also very, very important. If you see here in the main temple, there is a side chamber also. And that's a unique feature here. As I had discussed in my first two lectures, in Dasavatara temple and Bharut Stupa, both of which are in different stages of ruins. In Bharut, there is nothing, in fact. You see the specimens or the fragments in museums only. The carvings on the walls of the main structure give or throws tremendous light that what kind of architectural building there would have been. So in the previous slide, if you see, here you can see Sikhara, Nagara style. Here there is no Sikhara because of the destruction. But on the walls, you can see there are specific cells dedicated to gods have been there, where triangular, steep paramedical pediments are there. Under that, carving is there. Now this gives an idea that what kind of facade the temple would have at that time. And also there is a very important feature of Kashmir temple. Any temple you go, you will see a trefoil arch. Trefoil means three arches, you see, anywhere. So that's a unique characteristic. So while retaining the essential architectural components which were prevalent in other part of the country, Kashmir shows certain unique aspects in its temples. Now coming to the carvings, there are still some carvings available despite the massive destruction and then weather taking its toll on the carvings there. I'll just recall your attention to my first talk, which was on Dasavatara temple. There on the entrance gate, you can see Ganga on its mount, that is Makara, crocodile. The river goddess Ganga is there. Kashmir also shows that. Ganga is there on its mount Makara. Luckily, though most of the sculptures have been mutilated and broken, we find a statue or idol of sun god who is riding horse here, along with his two attendants here. And characteristic feature, two full-blown lotus you can see in his hand. He's riding the horse. This is a very unique depiction. He's riding it, not standing. Generally, in North India, you'll finding standing and somewhere even sitting on a single horse here. And not that only idols of sun god were there, but all the components of the ancient religious and cultural streams like idols of Shiva, idols of Vishnu, idols of Ganesha, and other goddesses were depicted, as happens in other temples in the country. Luckily, we have some idols remaining at the Martand, which would have survived because they were covered with debris. You can see here Vishnu with his characteristic Sankha, Chakra, Gada, and Pushpa sitting in a very special posture, which we call it Lalitasana. So I'm not going in the detail about the iconography here. What I'm trying to establish or present before you is that Kashmir Valley has all the features of Indian tradition of temple construction, temple worshipping, idol worshipping in all its form, which were being seen in other parts of the country. So Kashmir is not different in that way. Now, what is our responsibility? I'll just share, which this is a very disappointing aspect that media filmmaking, of which is a very important part, has depicted in one of the movies, that is Hather, this place as a den of evil. Now, this is not the correct depiction or representation of the Martand temple, which was dedicated to Surya god, sun god, and sun god was being worshipped in all parts of the country. You see in Modhera in Gujarat, Arsavalli in Srikakulam in Andhra Pradesh, Lularak Kund in Varanasi, Katarmal in Uttarakhand, Konark in Odisha. So any part of the country you go, as Vishnu, Shiva, Gauri, Ganesha, Kartikeya were worshipped, God was also worshipped. And Martand temple represents the true apogee or the pinnacle of the not only temple architecture, but the unique features of the Kashmir architecture. And if we show it in this form to our youth or to public, they will associate it with not the place for which it was constructed, but the picture or the images. Any viewer will have that, oh, there is some ruined monument there which is associated with it. So this is not the correct way to depict that. So that's all about the Martand place as far as the presentation is concerned. And I conclude my presentation. And if you want to have an introductory article on the Kashmir temples, you can go on LinkedIn. I have given the link and you can read it. And there are some other literature also. Thank you.
Excellent presentation. And I think one thing it really stands out that and really I really like your travels, and these are all your original pictures, Rajesh, right? These are your pictures
Yeah,
from your own camera.
I have traveled it with my family. Why I say my family? Because see, these are the parts which were not very easily accessible. But my family and we go there. We have gone there, and there are many places. I will show you in some of the other talks. So we shall know, as not only as an Indian, but whole world shall know that the correct picture of the Indian culture is not being presented.
Yes, that's right. And I think that's what your mission is, to tell a complete story of the Indian heritage.
Yes, yes. To know myself and then share as much as I can with everybody.
Right. No, and see, the thing is, the media, the general media, doesn't present a this kind of account of India, especially about Kashmir, because there's so much bad propaganda by all kinds of people who are trying to claim the history of Kashmir, but they do not go beyond a period that is of interest to them. So when you want to know about a place, you need to go to the entire history of that place, not just what you want to show. So it's more like a propaganda, and which is not like the real facts. But I'm so happy to see, and I'm honest with you, this is the first time I saw it. So I've heard about it, but I saw the pictures first time. So thank you, Rajesh ji, for so much. Do you want to add, like, what was your experience when you were shooting these places?
Experience in what sense?
Like when you were shooting, what were your feelings? Like what you were feeling when you were shooting this? Like, was there, you had, what were the emotions when you're shooting,
Such
especially
kind
this
of
time?
places. It's like I have discovered a real, uh, uh, you can see, uh, khajana, which we call, I mean, something. And see, these are just periphery of the information. That was an introduction for me. I went to Kashmir and I visited all those popular places also, the gardens, Salimar, Nishad, Mosque, all things. Because for me, whatever is available, I go and see it. But when I saw there are so many temples in Parihaspura, in Martand, in Pandarethan, in Mutton, in Pyre, and these places are not even known prior to coming to this place, because when you go to that place, you talk to few people, you read literature, they will also tell. And when you really go those places, you see it. So it was like you have discovered something very, very great. And it's happening even now. There are many places which I go in many parts of the country, and many of the things are also available in museums because of destruction. And if they are kept there and they are not told and associated with it, so you will just say, oh, this was just a temple, this was just a monument. Okay, fine. You have just come here and seen it. So that kind of image shall not be in your mind. Now, whenever you will talk about Martand, I think my viewers and will associate Kashmir and the Martand with this grand temple, with Lalita Aditya and the cultural heritage, which is so much part of the other part of the country, was very much part of the Kashmir also, and they will be prompted to read more about it. At
No,
least Raj Tarangini of Kalhan.
so I would like to propose that we do a series on, first of all, these temples of Kashmir which you visited, and so that more and more viewers can know about it, and it will be a good contribution to the history of the world.
Okay, I'll do that. I will cover Avanti Pura and then Pandarethan, and that will throw some more light on these
Yes.
aspects.
So thank you, Rajesh ji. It's always a pleasure. The last show that you did was also did very well, and this one also. And for all the viewers who joined us live, do comment on the YouTube if you watch on YouTube, and let us know your feedback. We'll continue this series of Kashmir temples first, and then we'll move on to other parts of the India with Rajesh ji. Thank you so much. Namaskar.
Thank you. Thank you very much.